important because the the general public, they make up the workforce in the corporate and the small business also. So in fact, Bank Negara also have a package for SMEs, small business. So the SME can apply the same thing for deferment of the loan and financing for a period of 6 months.
I'm just wondering about interest and late payment charges on loans. I mean, there seems to be a lot of confusion still on the interest accrued. Can you just clarify very quickly for our viewers what happens to the interest on these loan repayments? Yeah,
both the principal and interest will be waived, defer, not waived, defer until end of the year, 6 months. And after the 6 months, the interest actually is accrued. But then after the deferment period, the borrower still need to pay to honor the interest that is accrued plus the principal.
So, okay, that being the case, Paul, should everybody take this? I understand that this deferment package is automatic, and we are advised that if you don't want to defer payment, you should advise your bank such. What would be the considerations then for an individual? I mean, should they be thinking this as some sort of bonus for them or a kind of holiday, or should they in fact weigh the options before them? And what would those be?
I will leave it up to the individual because I think we'll leave this so-called benefit to those who are really needed. For those who still can afford, my view is they should continue to pay the interest, and if they choose to do that, they have to inform the bank to opt out.
Okay, and does this, I guess, benefit people on the street more, individuals more? I mean, when we're thinking about the responses to the current crisis, this is a great move by Bank Negara in terms of using its monetary policy to help mitigate some of the damage or the economic effects. Is this, does the onus of the burden fall more on the borrowers as opposed to the banks, Paul?
To own a house in Malaysia is actually so-called somebody is really a life dream. So in this so-called crisis, I would say the bank is helping the rakyat in Malaysia to continue to own a house but defer the loan and interest payment, so that will help them to ease their financial burden. Of course, the impact to the bank, we cannot deny it, but as a good corporate citizen, I believe the bank is doing the right thing for the country.
Right. So, Paul, just to kind of follow up on Melisa's question, I guess the essence of her question was, do the banks actually suffer that much as a consequence of these payments being deferred, or is it because it doesn't seem like they're putting up that much more?
I'm sure this is actually it's an impact to the bank. That's why I say during the crisis, the bank is playing their role as a good corporate citizen to help the country.
Okay, well, as the Deputy President of the Financial Planning Association of Malaysia, Paul, I'm sure lots of people are concerned about the personal finances at this point in time. Many people are self-employed, are freelancers, are contract workers, and they're thinking about how they're going to manage their finances in the coming months, especially after we move out of the movement control order. What advice would you give people who are struggling to manage their personal finances in these difficult times?
I would advise them to spend the money wisely, spend on the things that they really need and not what they want, and so that they can get out from the financial difficulties during this time. And if the consumer needs help, FM is rolling out a personal finance tips and advice through the web banner. And this initiative is part of our 20th year anniversary celebration with the theme Financial Literacy Year. We plan to get it ready by next month. It may be a little bit too late, but it's okay. so that the public can connect with the licensed financial planners for 30 minutes of advice.
All right, thank you so much for speaking with us, Paul. Now we're going to take a quick break on Consider This, and we'll be back to take a look at how businesses are coping during this period. Stay tuned.
He'll be more feisty.
Welcome back to Consider This. Melisa and Sharaad here with you. Now we're talking about the effects of the movement control order on businesses during this period. The Malaysian Employers Federation has hit out at the government's directive that requires employers to pay their workers in full during the MCO. Now, how will this newly announced 2-week extension impact businesses? We have joining us on the line Datuk Shamsuddin Bardan, Executive Director of the Malaysian Employers Federation, or better known as MEF. Good evening, Shamsuddin. Thank you for joining us today. Now, MEF has argued against the directive for full wage payment during this time. In your estimation, how many businesses will be able to comply with this order, and what kinds of businesses will that be?
Yep. I would say only a few of the businesses would be able to do that. And those kind of businesses surely will be the bigger businesses, the international businesses, yeah, and also the local conglomerate. But the majority of the employers that are what we consider as a small and medium industry will be facing very, very difficult period. Especially when you're talking about 98% of the companies in Malaysia are SMEs. And out of the 98%, 650,000 are very, very small employers with 5 and less employees. Those are the kind of companies that we have. And of course, these kind of companies actually do their business on day-to-day basis. And they don't have reserve, they don't have stock kind of thing. So if there is no revenue, but the government expects the employers, this kind of employees, to pay full wages during the MCO period, which is now 28 days, going to be 28 days. Then, of course, many of them would not be able to survive.
Shamsuddin, there are some expert opinion out there that this requirement is without legal basis. I mean, the MEF, in sort of putting out its statement saying it is unfair to expect this of employers, are you looking at the legal aspect of it, or are you just talking about the ethics of it, the practicalities of things?
No, when I say unfair, it is more like trying to get a win-win situation rather than looking at it from the legal angle. Legally, I would agree with the opinion to say that wages is for work done. And if there is no work done, that there should not be any wages. But of course, we as MEF don't want to take that very strict legal interpretation. But what we sought to do is trying to get every party, the employers, the employees, and also the government to co-share the burden, rather than loading all the burden to the employers. So we all have to actually, in a spirit of tripartism, try to maintain employment as far as possible. So what we are seeking to do is trying to say that, okay, employees should bear part of the cost, employees also should also bear part of the cost, and also the government needs to chip in.
Well, okay, on that note then, Shamsuddin, in the co-sharing notes, I mean, Bank Negara has already announced that there's going to be an automatic deferment on loan repayments. That is clearly a way the government, well, not Bank Negara, it's not the government, but a way in which to help lift the burden off employers in this difficult period. Do you think that this will help with the cash flow of businesses?
That will, of course, to a certain extent help the businesses. But, you know, when we're talking about smaller employers, the one that I mentioned, about 650,000 of them, most of them would not be taking any loan anyway because they use their own capital to do the business. Yeah? Because being small, they don't need big capital in that sense. But, of course, their revenue will be very small in that sense. Yeah?
So on that note then, shouldn't they then pass on whatever help that they're getting with this co-sharing theme that you mentioned about, passing that on, businesses passing that on to support workers?
Yep. So this is where we say that, yes, I mean, if we are talking about formulation of how much the employees can bear, MEF can suggest or had suggested to the members that as employers, we shouldn't be taking a policy of no pay at all. Yeah? So we suggest that employees take 50% of the cost of wages during that period, sorry, and the rest will be borne by the employees themselves through annual leave or even unpaid leave, and the government has to chip in to make sure that there is enough money for the employees. Yeah? And of course, in that sense, it's important for us to say that yeah, there are some policies which are being drawn up currently. We are talking about ERP, for example, but then the ERP condition is very, very, I would say, stringent.
You say that ERP being the Employment Retention Program that you're referring to?
Okay. Yes. So the requirement is to say that you must be on unpaid leave for 30 days. Of course, employers will not want to do that. I say that we seek to pay a certain amount, but this is where MEF had proposed to the authorities to say that that requirement of 30 days unpaid leave need to be reviewed quickly, so that even if the employee is on unpaid leave for a certain period less than 30 days, then they should be paid pro rata.
Shamsuddin, under the current situation, how likely is it that businesses will start to fail? As much as they want to pay workers, as much as they want to continue, what are the prospects of large-scale failure of business in the next couple of weeks?
That's why I say, if you look at MEA's report, the latest report, they say that possibly if this kind of thing continue, there will be about 2.4 million people losing their jobs. This is what MEF is trying to actually avoid. We want the company to actually be assisted to retain employment as long as possible, so that at the end of the day, when COVID-19 is over, then the employees still have a job to look for. And of course, on the employer part, we are expecting that when there are upturn in business, then they are ready to grab the opportunities rather than trying to let go the employees now, and when the opportunity comes later on, they need to re-employ, retrain, which is very, very time-consuming and very costly. Yeah.
Can we, coming back to what you said about the co-sharing between employers, employees, and the government in every aspect, what are you hoping the government do in trying to help ease the burdens during this time?
Yeah, so one of the proposals that MEF had submitted to the government is trying to encourage employers to retain their employees. So we suggested that let us look at EPF, reduce the employer's contribution to about 5%, and on condition that the employers don't retrench the employees during certain period. And if they do retrench, then the rest of the statutory contribution needs to be made up by the employer's consent. So this is to say that in the event, if the employer actually didn't do any retrenchment at all, then the contribution remains at 5%. And of course, it's up to the government whether they want to actually now, after that, to actually credit some money to the employee's account so that the reduced amount can be made up by the government's chipping into the contribution.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing those insights. Now, we're going to take a quick break, but after this, we're going to get the perspective of the trade union. So stay tuned to consider this. Thanks for staying with us on Consider This. I'm Melisa, Idris, with me Sharaad, Kuttan. If you've just joined us, we are discussing Bank Negara's deferment package and its impact during this time. Malaysian Trades Union Congress has welcomed Bank Negara's directive, saying that this was the single most important initiative since the COVID crisis. However, the MTUC was critical of the announcement for allowing for EPF account to withdrawals, calling it a case of having to rob from one's own savings and the failure of the government to protect its people. Now, MTUC has called on the government to use its reserve funds to provide interest-free loans of at least 5,000 ringgit each to help EPF members to sustain their households during this crisis. We have joining us on the line Jay Solomon, Secretary General of the Malaysian Trades Union Congress, or better known as MTUC. Solomon, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Now, what exactly has the MTUC observed regarding the effects of the movement control order on workers since it began? I think just a little over a week now.
Yes, good evening. The effects ranges from devastating disruption to lives, businesses, and livelihood, coupled with numerous contradictions. It is not totally a lockdown, but movement control order. First, it was MCO for all except for essential services. Then exception letters began to emerge for non-essential industries. Of course, there were many responsible employers who arranged work from home and are paying full pay, even for those who are not able to work from home. But at the same time, there are some irresponsible employers who begin to urge workers to either work or go on no pay leave or take annual leave or even replacement leave. We have also received reports that many contract workers have been told that their contracts are no longer valid or will not be continued. This is what we have observed, among others, in the last week or so.
So, can you also clue us into the many foreign workers that make up the workforce? How empowered are they? Do the responses by employers to them differ from, say, local Malaysians who are working? And what is the impact of that?
Yes, of course, there is some form of discrimination that we have received reports on, but not many. So far it is under control, and whenever we receive such complaints, we will try to persuade the employees to pay them. So at this point of time, it's too early to say whether there is serious damage for the foreign workers. So at this point of time, we can contain it.
Okay, Solomon, just a few minutes ago, we had joining us on the line Shamsuddin Bardan from the Malaysian Employers Federation, and he talked about the kind of co-sharing the burden during this crisis, that while businesses must pay employees, the employees too must take a share of the burden, perhaps by taking a pay cut in order to help enterprises with the cash flow problems survive this period. What is the MTUC's position on this?
Very interesting, because when you talk about co-sharing, in good times, they never mention about co-sharing. It was only the unions and the workers have been asking for co-sharing. But in this kind of crisis, we don't mind giving any form of contribution on co-sharing, but when we were left out with peanuts in good times, how can we actually contribute anything on co-sharing now? Because we don't have anything to actually give up at this juncture, because we need every dollar to survive.
So, that being the reality, right? So we have a government order that says that employers have to pay full wages. But if that is going to result in a business closures and the loss of employment, between the two, the trade-off, insisting on full wages or losing your job, what would you advise?
I think if the government plays its role effectively, there will be none. There will be no layoffs. You see, this is not an economic crisis. I think everybody should understand that. It's a global pandemic crisis. So the government has to take charge and ensure everyone's livelihood is protected, especially the SMEs, the formal and the informal sector workers will be the most vulnerable, and they should be assisted
very
by
quickly,
the government.
Can I get you to clarify, the government must play its role. What is that that you are proposing?
Yes, among others, what we are trying to say is that, first thing is that the government must direct the Minister of Human Resources to implement a national employment emergency regulation. This will prevent retrenchment, among others. So, if this is done, then of course there will be no pay cuts, there will be no retrenchment, and we also urge employers not to be short-sighted, because employers will suffer losses if they decide to actually create unemployment. They must realize that employers who suffer losses must prove the losses. Until then, it's wrong to ask workers to take a pay cut or retrench them. So employers must be mindful that businesses will not be able to revive if the workers cannot survive.
In the remaining time, Solomon, that we have, could you quickly explain to us the MTUC's People's Livelihood Fund proposal that you have?
Yes, I mean, the People's Livelihood Fund that we're talking about is that we must understand a global pandemic crisis has struck the core of the nation. That is the rakyat. So for the first time, we are talking about human lives where no one is spared. Therefore, the priority must be the rakyat, nothing else. So People's Livelihood Fund focuses on rakyat, that is SMEs, workers in the formal and informal sectors such as taxi drivers, stall owners, and gig economy. So the allocation of funds must reflect this. And the government must be transparent with the allocation to ensure that it reaches the needy. The previous economic stimulus packages were largely for big corporations, but very little for SMEs, formal, informal sector, and individuals.
Right.
The government is also asking the people to take their own money out from the EPF meant for old age. This is wrong.
Okay.
The government, I mean, it is available 400 billion reserve. They should use it to support the rakyat immediately.
Well, hopefully
to a meaningful and
hopefully,
inclusive
Solomon,
allocation.
hopefully we'll find out on Friday what the new fiscal package will be as the government will announce it soon. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Unfortunately, we've run out of time on Consider This for this episode. Sharaad and I will be back with you for another episode tomorrow night, 10 p.m. So as always, stay home and stay safe, folks. Thank you for watching.